Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second edition of the SportsSpeak video vlog. Sorry it's been forever. It's been about, 8, 9 months since my last one of these. Been a little bit busy and a little bit hectic, but trying to get a couple of things off my chest today. Oh, really just one. Football season looks like it's winding down. Got the Patriots versus the Giants for the Super Bowl coming up in another week. Pro Bowl's this weekend, but who really cares? None of my teams are really playing. None of my teams are going to be in it. None of my favorite players are going to be in it. So Super Bowl itself is really a little bit lackluster for me this season. Ray Lewis doesn't have a shot at another ring. Phillip Rivers doesn't have a shot at his first. And the Cowboys as an organization don't have a shot at their sixth. So it's pretty much a wash for me. Uh, really want to talk about something that's been on my mind since I've been seeing all the coverage for it on ESPN over the past basically 2 weeks, if not the entire season. And that's the drama with Peyton Manning, the Indianapolis Colts, and Andrew Luck. Now, I understand that Peyton Manning is, although he is the first ballot Hall of Famer, maybe the greatest quarterback to ever play this game. That's arguable. He's due $28 million and coming off a neck surgery. You don't know if he's going to be able to play again. You've got to make this decision in basically a month and a half now. I can't say that I blame the Colts if they were to release him or trade him. I can't say that I blame them for that. My problem with it isn't so much the issue with Peyton as it is the issue with Andrew and how they got in this mess already. Andrew Luck is probably the best quarterback prospect entering the NFL in the last decade, probably in the last 2 decades. I can't think of anyone who's had this much fanfare since 1992. Maybe Peyton, if you want to count that. But even that, it was arguable that you take Peyton and you take Ryan Leaf. Peyton obviously turned out to be the right choice. But with Andrew, there is no comparison. There's nobody in his class, even RG3, who had a remarkable season, isn't really garnering attention as a plausible #1 pick over Andrew. So I understand the fascination with Andrew Luck. 10,000 career yards, 80 touchdowns, a ridiculous 72% completion percentage. I understand all of that. But the Colts aren't just a quarterback away from contention. Like, they're not a team that's set and they just need a quarterback to lift them over the top. They're a team that is pitiful, to put it lightly. They struggle at every level in every section of their team. Defensively, they're atrocious. Point blank and period. Your leading tackler, Pat Anger, middle linebacker, had a really good season. After him, your second leading tackler was Antoine Bethea, who was a free safety. It is preposterous that a free safety would be your second leading tackler. He is your last line of defense. So what that means is his teams were able to either pass or run or both over you and just impose their will on your defense. And he was forced repeatedly to come up with a play to stop them from getting in the end zone, basically. Let's look at a few numbers here. You were fifth to last in points per game. You gave up 26.9. Passes deflected, you were dead last. You only had 55. You gave up 19 touchdowns, which was tied for second worst in the league. You were fifth worst in terms of points per game. I already covered that one, but I didn't say exactly where you ranked. And then interceptions, you only had 8. The only area where you're maybe even middle of the pack would be sacks. And even then, you're still towards the bottom because you only had 29, which is tied for third worst in the league. That's your best. That and points are your best statistical finishes defensively. Fifth worst in the league, third worst in the league. Those are your 2 best finishes for this season as a defense. That's ridiculous. That just shows how absolutely, unquestionably awful you are on the defensive side of the ball. You have, in my opinion, if you want to count Pat, because he had a pretty good season, if you want to count Pat, you have 4 quality defenders on your roster. Buffet, Anger, Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney. That's it. And then even when you get to Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney, they're both undersized defensive ends who, in all seriousness, should probably be outside linebackers in a 3-4. Because I won't say they're easy to run against, but their lack of body mass just makes them more susceptible to run plays than, say, a big defensive end like a Julius Peppers or a Will Smith in New Orleans or Justin Smith in San Francisco. So while they may play the run fairly well, they're not built to do that. So asking them to do it is a stretch, essentially. Your linebacking core is average at best. Your interior defensive line play is awful. Your secondary is putrid. Your corners are, for lack of a better term, pathetic. And then that's basically just on defense. And you would think that if one side of the ball is set, or if one side of the ball is awful, the other side of the ball should be set. That's not the case here. Your quarterback was hurt, so obviously, but your backups and the guy you brought in, Kerry Collins, they played terribly. Your running backs are average or below average. Your offensive line is clearly below average, and the best player on that below average offensive line is Jeff Saturday, who's contemplating retirement. Which means that if he does retire, you're going to be worse than you were last year, or this year, since the season's not over yet, when you were abysmal. I don't know what's below abysmal. Like, I don't think you can get worse than abysmal. Like, there must be varying degrees of it, because you're going to be worse, obviously. But I can't think of anything worse than abysmal. Except garbage, which I won't call them that, because they are professionals. Garbage. But wide receivers relatively set. You've got Reggie Wayne, even though he's on the downward side of his career. Austin Collie and Pierre Garçon are both quality young receivers. Pierre drops too many passes, but I mean, sometimes receivers do that. Case in point, Terrell Owens. Tight end Dwight Clark's on the downside of his career. He's missed 16 games in the last 2 seasons. 11 games last year, 6 games this year. Correction, 11 games last year, 5 games this year. But, so you don't really have anything for this guy to work with if you draft Andrew Luck. It's like you're taking him, throwing him into, for lack of a better term, a hellhole, and asking him to bring you out of it. I don't see how that's going to happen. Even when you drafted Peyton, you drafted Peyton, and then you struggled for years until he was able to develop and bring you out. But this is a different league now. Like, rookie contracts are different. I'm not necessarily sure that Andrew Luck will be in Indianapolis long enough to rescue you, so to speak. And then again with Peyton, you got Peyton. You already had Marshall Faulk. So you had a quality Hall of Fame running back in the fold. And then even after he left, you had Edgerrin James, who at the time, before injuries derailed him, was a stellar NFL running back. If memory serves me correctly, he led the league in rushing as a rookie. So, you've had pieces running. You already have Marvin Harrison, who's probably a Hall of Famer at wide receiver. I just don't see, and all these guys were early in their career, if not in their prime. So you're bringing Andrew Luck into a situation where the best players on his team have maybe 3 or 4 productive years left. That's just irresponsible. It's irresponsible to the city of Indianapolis, irresponsible to the fans of the Indianapolis Colts, and it's irresponsible to Andrew Luck. Now, I understand Andrew Luck doesn't really have a choice because he's in the draft, unless he pulls the Eli Manning and say, I don't want to play there. But your team is awful. There's no other word to describe it. It's just a bad football team. Like, you're bad defensively, you're bad offensively, you're bad on special teams. You're just a bad football team. Now, you could take this pick, conceivably, and trade it. Reportedly, you could get a first, two firsts, 2 seconds. And I'm pretty sure you could finagle a third out of there if you wanted to. That being the case, if that is the case, here's the haul you would have. You would have whoever you trade with's first pick this year. So you'd have a first round pick still. You would then have their second round and your second round pick this year. And then your third through six, 3 through 6. Next season you would have 2 firsts. Conceivably, this team's still probably going to be bad. They'll maybe be a little bit better with Andrew Luck, but it's still conceivable because chances are the team that you get this pick from is going to be a bad football team as well because they need a quarterback. Unless it's the Jets, which I don't see why you would do that. So chances are they're going to be a bad football team too, which means next year they'll probably at best be an average football team. You're still going to be a bad football team with Andrew Luck or without him, so it really doesn't matter. So you would have their first and your first next season. Which means at best you'll probably pick, or worst, you'll be picking early and in the middle of the draft in the first round. You'll have their second and your second next year, which again will be early, middle of the second round at worst. And then potentially have their third and your third and then your 4 through 6. Or just your 3rd through 6. That is, you pick up an extra pick this year along with your first and the second. So you'd have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds this year. You'd have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds next year. And possibly have another 2 picks in round 3. That's 9 picks. You can essentially replenish, if that it's an 8 or 9, no matter how you slice it. So at least it's 8, at the most it's probably 9. You can essentially replenish one side of the ball and build a young, cohesive unit from trading 1 draft pick. You can draft Andrew Luck if you want to. Again, you're still going to be a bad football team probably 3 or 4 years from now because you're not going to have that many picks because you spent this one, the best asset you have, on him, and then you're just going to have the number of picks that you have every other year, which is about 6, unless you make some trades. So you would essentially have, if you made this trade, you would have in the first 2 rounds, or this year, next year, you would essentially have a whole nother draft plus 3 more picks. And they would all be early so you could get quality players to replace the rift-raft / garbage / whatever you want to call it, players on your football team. And I say players loosely. Now, I understand they're better than me. I'm not a professional athlete. So clearly they were better than me at the only level I played at, which was high school. They were better than me because they played in college, and they're better than me because they played in the NFL. However, also clearly, they're not nearly as good at their position as other players in the NFL. You need players. Point blank and period. Drafting 1 player is not going to cut it. So I don't understand how you can take and say drafting this 1 guy can save us when essentially betting on 1 guy is what got you in this mess in the first place. I'm just not understanding how that's not. I can't argue that that's not an irresponsible decision. It'll be history repeating itself, and you'll ride that wave again. Now maybe he gets you a Super Bowl like Peyton did. Maybe he gets you to another one like Peyton did. But why would you repeat history when you have the chance to improve upon it? That's the question that the Colts, and particularly Jim Irsay, have to ask themselves. Why would you repeat history when you could improve it? This is the 2nd edition of the SportsSpeak video vlog. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully y'all get some comments and some opinions about this. And before we say goodbye, rest in peace to probably one of the most legendary figures in collegiate athletics, much less collegiate football, Joe Paterno. Definitely a legend. Legacy tarnished at the end. Could he have done more? Absolutely. But do we all have faults? Absolutely. You can't hold that against the guy. I mean, mistakes were made. Can't fix them. Past is the past. And let's not forget that Joe Paterno was not the monster in all of this. That monster allegedly is Jerry Sandusky. So if you're going to have ire, if you're going to have anger, if you're going to have hatred, have it at the person who brought all this about, not at the person who it seems to be blamed. Hope you guys have a good one. Hope you're enjoying your new year. And I'll see you next time. Peace.